This is Call with Dad's podcast, where today's issues, concerns, and joys of being a dad are discussed, with your hosts E.A. Maynard and Mr. Pancakes sharing their views, experiences, and all things they know. Join the journey with us. Welcome to Call with Dads, more than a podcast or a website, but your home for a community of dads who want to be better. Now let's get started.
Yeah, perfect. So let's just get into this. Let's start diving into trying to figure out, because like I started saying at the beginning, I don't have the most positive view from what I've seen of gentle parenting, or as you call it, peaceful parenting. Right now, I've heard several names. Passive parenting is another one. There's a lot of terms for that of what, as far as I'm aware, you're going with and you're trying to promote. To me, like I said, Mr. Pancake and I are obviously on one side of the spectrum, and you're on the other, and we both seem to dislike the opposite side. Now, I'm hoping this conversation can kind of narrow that divide, because I do see some, and we've even said we do see some benefit in the gentle parenting scope, but I think you've said on another interview that you don't believe in disciplining it at all, which to me seems just crazy, because, there has to be a way to teach kids consequences. There has to be something to build a stable understanding of what's right and wrong, because if you don't, from everything I'm hearing, teachers are having a heck of a time with kids now who basically were taught that their feelings are the biggest thing that they need to be concerned about. You have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I don't think the word I used was discipline. I would say discipline is very important. Maybe it would be helpful if I just defined what I mean by discipline.
It was punishment. I think it was maybe that's what it was.
Yeah,
Punishment.
Let's do this, because like discipline. I said, that was my take on it. And of course, when I heard your interview, I was driving back and yelling at traffic. So between listening to your talk and yelling at people, because traffic in the DC area is always so much fun, it's better for you to explain to people, first off, what the whole concept that you have behind you is, what you're trying to promote, and then maybe we can figure out what actually is going on and how it could be beneficial to both sides. And who knows, maybe we'll come closer to agreeing than disagreeing at this point.
Yeah, for sure. No, I could definitely speak to all of that. Are we going right now, or?
Yeah, let's go right now. Okay. I'm saying we've been recording for the last few minutes, so Let's go into it.
Right. So yeah, I would say discipline is important. I would define discipline as just correcting and instructing. So, of course, those are essential things to be able to correct our kids when they go wrong, and to instruct them on what they should do, right? And so I think where we diverge is just how we correct, right? And so what I would do is, or what I would not do is, I would never punish. And so the reason for that is that so when you punish, you're assuming that the problem with the child is one of motivation. You're assuming they already know what they should do, and they know exactly how to do it, and they're just choosing not to. And the problem with that is, a lot of the time, or I would say almost always, it's not a problem of motivation. It's actually some kind of a skill problem. Like, for example, they haven't developed the skill or the discipline of self-control. And so they need our help to learn how to have self-control, which is even difficult for a lot of adults. And so expecting children to already be like experts at self-control, I think, is an unreasonable expectation. So things like just asking, what was going on for them, trying to figure out their perspective. Was it that they were hungry? Was it that they were just full of energy and they needed to run? Did they just feel like they weren't getting enough attention? And so when we find that root cause of what was going on for them, now we can actually address the root cause instead of just assuming the root cause is motivation. So that's a little bit of where I'm coming from with the punishment angle.
All right. So
You
let me first start off because I have a 6-year-old and a bit over 6 and a 2-year-old that's a bit over 2. And with that thought, I know my son well enough. I know his motives as he does it because, one, I've been with him almost every day for the last 6 years. I know my son better than anybody else possibly can, and all this. So when he does something, I can tell what he's going to do by the look in his face. And I've talked with him enough. I know his motives. I know why he's tended to do things, this and that. My daughter, being only 2.5 or 2 so years old, I know her well enough because the fact of when she does something, she does it at certain times for certain reasons and her reactions. Now I know when she's hungry, she's acting up and things like that. So the problem I have with not knowing motives is, and I don't know how old your kids are. I forget what you said they were on the prior interview you did, but as far as I'm aware, I can tell what my kids are tending to think and do and why they're doing it. The fact of siblings are very much at, as soon as they have the ability to comprehend what they want and things like that, they become very much motivated by certain things until they get to a certain point where they can develop that understanding that, let me ask for it. My daughter, she doesn't know how to properly ask for it, and we're teaching her that. So that's a big thing of teaching her. You say, please, may I have, can I, things like that. So obviously we're teaching in when she does something she knows she's not supposed to do, because she will look right at us when she goes to do it to see if we're paying attention, tells me she knows that she's doing something wrong. Now, kids can determine right and wrong. Most from what everything I've read over the years, from what I've seen from my own kids, which I still have a long way of seeing the things they'll do, is at a young age, they're able to determine right and wrong from the samples we set as parents. Now, are you saying that kids at young ages don't have the ability to demonstrate motive? Or are you saying that kids at general, there's no way for a parent to know the motives of the kid?
So I think it's easy to be wrong. Like sure, you might have a great guess, and even if you're right most of the time, there's a lot of the time where there's at least one aspect of it that you don't understand. And to the degree that you don't understand it, you're going to be like way off base and the solution is just not going to work. Right. And so I think it's just better for our kids if we give them the benefit of the doubt. And instead of assuming bad intentions, assuming that they're just not motivated, we just see, was there a good reason? Kind of just asking them all the questions we need to figure things out rather than just assuming that we already do understand.
Right. So my daughter's 5. She's about to be 6. She'll be 6 in like December timeframe. Now, what you were saying earlier, that like we got to find the root cause, situations like that. Now, I would say I lean a little bit more towards traditional, but I'm probably kind of right in the center of between the, Eric, you and Luke, you. I'm probably more in the center. So me and my wife is a lot more towards, Luke, you there. She like refuses spanking whatsoever. And I'm cool with that. Whatever. Hey, that's, all about it. Whatever. But I'm a little bit more in the middle, and I will go out of my way to try to find what the problem is or fix the problem, but I won't fix it for her all the time, unless it's something that needs to be fixed for her, obviously. I'll try and find the problem, help her figure it out, learn to manage her emotions and stuff like that. So I do all of those things, but I mean, I don't know, just as I guess you'll learn over time when your kid's like 4 or 5 years old, sometimes that kid's just like, no, you know, but they know better. You've told them 65 times prior to that, don't stand on that table because you're going to bust your freaking teeth open. If you fall and bust your teeth open, I'm going to take you to the hospital. Remember the last time you did it? And then she fell, busted her teeth open, and take her to the hospital. I said, see, I told you, don't stand on the table. And then 3 days later, what's she doing standing on the table? So, like, how do you handle a situation like that in a peaceful parenting? Like, I told you not to do that. I told you the consequences, taught you all about it. You even learned the consequences the hard way. And then you're still doing it. Now it's like, now, all right, fine. Hey, get down. I'm going to take you down. If I catch you back up there, you get a butt whooping. And I'm sorry. There's no other way in my mind, to correct that, because you've already gone through everything in every which way. And that's what I say. I'm all about trying to find the correct way, teaching her why, explaining the scenario, showing her. I've even let her with quite a few things. Yeah, go ahead. Touch that. It's fine. Do it. Yeah, I've done it quite a bit. Let her learn the hard way. So, what do you say to like situations like that? How do you, because, in my mind, that's it. Let's do it. We're just spanking now. It's the last resort. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And so in my mind, there's two scenarios. Either one, they're able to have the self-control and the wisdom and the discipline to not do the dangerous thing, or two, they're too young to understand, they just can't comprehend it yet. And so in that case, what I would do is I would remove the option. I would just make it impossible. So the common example is if the kid's running out into the street, well, if he's not able to be responsible enough to handle playing next to the street, I'm just going to not let him play where he can run into the street. I'm going to make sure he's in a yard with a fence. I'm going to make sure he goes to a park that has a fence, or that I'm going to be standing in between him and the street, or we're just going to play inside. Whatever it is, I'm just not even going to let it be an option for him to endanger himself or someone else, or to destroy something.
Right. Not all the time is that reasonable, though. You can't always remove that situation. Those situations are going to come about no matter what you do.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like running out in the street. I think someone said he put a fence. I can't. Literally not allowed. County doesn't allow it. It's 100% impossible. When I take my daughter to school, or my wife takes her to school, we're like, I'll take her outside, I'll put her shoes on, and then I'll be getting her backpack, and she's just standing there in the garage hanging out. What do I do? Like, you get some duct tape and duct tape her to the wall. She's free. I can't just lock her to everything all the time, to prevent it from happening. So in that scenario, if I turn around to grab her backpack or whatever, and she bolts to the street, it's gonna happen somewhere along the lines. That, like, standing up on the table, that was the thing that I talked about earlier. She's done that several times. She's climbed up on top of the bookshelf, because we have big bookshelves. We read books constantly. She's climbed up the bookshelf and snatched that bookshelf over on top of herself. And that was after, like, me telling her 10 times. What do I do? Just take the bookshelf and all the books and just get rid of it? That's kind of unreasonable. That's beyond unreasonable. The situations like that they're in play. There's no other option.
Yeah, I would say you do have options. If you turn around to get the backpack and she runs away, just get the backpack first. If there's a table that's a problem, either somehow secure the table so it isn't dangerous, or get a different table, or don't let her be there unsupervised. Or if the bookcase is falling over from the wall, there's ways to secure the bookcase to the wall. You can lock the door that the bookcase is in. You can, move the bookcase until she's a few months older and she can understand. It's just, if the child is going to be in danger and they're not capable of they're just not responsible enough to handle that danger. I'm just not going to give them the option to seriously injure themselves. I'm just not going to do it. I'm
Yeah.
going to find a way.
Now
That's
let me
fair. I
jump.
mean, we tried. It didn't work.
Right, but let me jump into this because one, I have a boy, and my son is going. I can tell you, even all the way into my 20s,
Mm.
I didn't pay attention if something was dangerous or not. Literally, I can't tell you how many scars I have on my body because, you know, it looks fun or there's a pretty girl watching or whatever it was, you know?
Builds character.
Yes. But the fact is like my kids both try to climb the cat towers to play on them. I pull them down, I stop them, this and that, but they still do it. I need to watch them, blah, blah, blah. I cannot screw a cat tower into the wall. There's limits to what can be done. And you cannot bubble wrap the whole world to protect your kids. That kind of just makes them almost unable to handle any real adversity or challenge because, at least from what I understand, because if the child doesn't have something to understand the consequences to their actions, they're going to be thinking that whatever they do, somebody's going to be there to save them. Somebody's
Right.
going to protect them from whatever bad choices they make.
Right.
And
The way if
You
you've
know-
removed every apparent adversity, then she'll never have any adversities ever in her life. So
right. But
what you gonna do when she gets older?
yeah, and the fact is, and I don't know your standpoint on this, but to me, you have to teach kids consequences. You have to teach them that I'm not always going to be there to save them. Now, mind you, I put a fence up in my yard. I put a divider in the front so that my daughter doesn't get ahead of me and run out to the road. I have taken steps to try to limit dangers, but at the same point, I didn't put foam on every corner. I didn't basically put bubble wrap around their head so that they can run around, and I'm afraid that they're going to run into a wall because they're being crazy. You know, there has to be a point that you let them go into dealing with danger. You have to understand that the way they learn to comprehend stuff is not by removing, but by letting them experience.
Mhm.
And again, for me, a big thing is understanding consequences to action. That's a
Mhm.
big thing for traditional parenting. I know a lot of people push traditional parenting, it's all about spanking. Well, traditional parenting's really, I know a lot of people that traditional parenting that has never spanked their kid. But
Yeah.
at the same note, they teach their kids, hey, you do this, you have this. Just like I tell my son, after 10 times telling him, brush your teeth, I finally say, you know what? Fine, don't brush your teeth. You don't get a story. That's all it is. Or you're going to get cavities. I tried to teach him there's consequences to his actions. Now, what's your thought about the fact of removing those obstacles or removing the lessons in consequences?
Yeah, so I'm actually 100% for teaching kids about consequences, but in a slightly different way. So rather than giving consequences, I would teach them about what the natural consequences are. So I would say, instead of I'm not going to read you a story if you don't brush your teeth, I'm, to the degree that they're able to understand at whatever age they are, I'm going to say, hey, this is what's going to happen if you don't brush your teeth.
Teeth are gonna run out of your face.
Right. Your teeth will turn yellow. You'll get cavities, and you'll have to go to the dentist to fix them. That'll be painful. You'll hate that. You have to sit in that chair for like an hour. And
I always do this. I go like that.
Yeah.
I go, see?
Yeah.
You see?
Right, and your breath will stink. No one's going to want to be around you. It's going to be really hard to make friends. Everyone's going to run away. And these are all the reasons you should, right? And so that's why I have this expectation that you should brush your teeth. And, part of that conversation, I'm also going to be asking, what is it? I've noticed that you haven't been brushing your teeth. Can you tell me what's going on? And, depending on what age, I might have to ask a lot more questions to get anything out of them. But, is it that you don't like this new toothpaste? Is it that your new toothbrush you don't like? Is it that I interrupted you while you're in the middle of reading a book or doing something and you just wanted to finish that thing first? Like, is it that you know it's bedtime and you're just not tired yet, or you are tired? Whatever the problem is, I can't solve it if I don't know what it is. And so that if it's as simple as just changing back to the old toothpaste that he used to like more, that's a whole lot easier than like giving him these threats of consequences and just saying, I'm not going to do all these things unless you just do this thing. But there might just be a really easy way to fix that.
And a lot of times you're right. There is sometimes a reason why. I mean, I can attest. My daughter had plenty of reasons why she didn't want to, like, if we're talking about specifically brushing your teeth, my daughter definitely didn't brush her teeth for a lot of reasons. There were this or that, the other, she didn't want to, or whatever. But as she got older, like, she knows all the reasons. She knows all the rules. She knows all about toothpaste. She knows very darn well we have a big box of 35 toothbrushes and they're all different colors. So if it's the blue one she don't like, she can just go get the pink one. We have 4 different toothpastes so we can deal with all her different freaking, flavors of the week or whatever the case is. So we've literally solved every single problem, other than the problem is I'm 5 and I just don't friggin' wanna. And that does happen. My daughter just simply does not want to. No other reason. No. It's bedtime. I know. Okay. You got to brush your teeth. I don't want to. Okay. Are you not tired yet? You got to get up and, in the morning time, we got to go to school. So you got to go to bed within the next 20 minutes. I know I'm tired. I want to go to bed. Okay. So go brush your teeth. You have to go brush your teeth before bed. I don't want it. So it gets to a point where it's like, all right, go brush your teeth, or I brush your teeth. And if I brush your teeth, your gums are going to bleed because it's not going to be fun. I'm going to do it hard while you're kicking and screaming. Well, I don't brush hard, but the last time I did that, because she like freaked out on me, and the last time I did it, I had to like hold her still and like brush. And as she was doing that, she's doing this. So she's jabbing herself. Like, I'm not jabbing her. I'm just trying to brush her teeth. And she's doing this, and she made her teeth bleed, or her gums bleed. And I was like, see, I told you not to do that stuff. It's like I told her 1,000 times. She knew better. The only reason she didn't want to brush her teeth. So I feel like there's, no matter what you do, she's getting to a point where she knows better. She knows darn better. You know what I mean? And all the things that I read, about, gentle parenting versus traditional, spanking, this and that, pretty much every single one of them says about 6 to 7 spanking is, if you're even a spanking person, is done, which right. I'm not. I will spank, but I don't spank, if that makes sense. Like I think the entire time I've spanked her twice since I've had her, and that's literally been the only reason, because it was like something severe, or I've told her 65,000 times, and me and my wife have gone through every scenario and it just didn't work,
And on spanking, yeah. I think it was another guest after M.A. Franklin we had on. He was mentioning about that age point where spanking no longer has any value to a child. Yeah. And I looked up just to check him afterwards because I was curious, and it
was like 6 to
6 years
10,
old.
10 is like done, and then like 6 is where you should start the stopping.
Well, from what he explained and from what I've researched, by the time a child hits 6 years old, their comprehension level is to the point that spanking can be a deterrent, but it's not the best option. You can talk to the right. child, all this, they're able to, but before then, until they fully comprehend everything, it's just like letting a kid touch an open fire. They burn their finger, they know hot is hot, things like that.
Yeah.
Sometimes a physical reaction, and mind you, there's a difference in spanking, and Luke, you can jump in on this because I know you're going to want to say something after I say this, but like my daughter wears a diaper. If I smack her butt, I think the cats have smacked my daughter harder than I have. It's more of a psychological effect.
Yeah.
Now, if you're hitting your child and leaving bruises, that's not spanking. That's right. That's right. Abuse. And I will
Correct.
I'm fully against somebody hitting their child hard enough that it leaves bruises. To me,
Absolutely.
you're letting your anger get the best of you. And if your anger is going to get the best of you, you should not spank a child in any way. Anger
Right.
in any form of discipline is a bad choice. I don't care. And this is going to lead me into another question after you talk, but the fact is anger seems to be a driving factor that people let their anger get the best of them in their decision making. And
Mm.
what what do you have to say the fact of I'm obviously pro spanking up to like 5 years old because I know that their butts are not going to really sense it. It's more of I mean, I've slapped my buddies on the shoulder harder than I've ever hit my daughter on the butt. You know what I mean? Or even all the years my son, the
Yeah.
the volume or the pressure that I do use is not hard enough to even put a dent in memory foam. But they know that when I play and I hit them a little bit harder than that, they don't phase at all. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Again, it's a emotional and a sensational to hit that fire's hot kind of reaction. So that's my take on spanking. Now, like I said,
Right.
obviously you have a different take because I could see it in your face.
Yeah, no, I mean, for me, it's there are practical arguments, there are biblical arguments, but fundamentally, for me, it comes down to the moral argument. And so, I mean, I think you can make the practical and biblical argument, but also morally, I think it's so the principle I'm operating under is called the non-aggression principle. So it's the idea that you can't aggress against someone except in self-defense. And so I think that's a universal thing. You can never use force morally unless someone is attacking you and you just use force to stop that, to defend yourself. And so in the case of spanking, that's not self-defense, so I would say it's immoral, right? And also as far as the diaper and the pain thing, I'm not sure what the point would be. Like, isn't it the whole point is that it hurts a little bit? Like the analogy with the fire is the fire hurts, so they're not going to do that again. And the spanking hurts, so they're not going to do that again. So isn't the whole point that there's some pain there?
No, not necessarily. So let's put it this way. In the same concept, my son past the age of spanking, right? But I can use my voice and with different tones of my voice, be able to give him a message of what you're doing is wrong or what you're doing is good. I can use my voice in both ways, which I believe is a tone, which is part of the gentle parenting is using tones and different things to help correct your children. Now, mind you, I might be using it in a different way, but because I think you prefer not to use any angry tones and things like that. And if I'm wrong, correct me. But I can use my tone and create a emotional response with my tone. My daughter knows that spanking is supposed to hurt. She knows that if something hits her butt and she did something wrong, it's a clicking in her mind of this is wrong, I should not do it. You don't
Mhm.
have to create pain in every instance. The correlation of fire being hot is that sensation of there's physical contact that teaches the lesson, not necessarily the pain in it. My daughter, I taught her hot by letting her put her hand over top of my coffee. She didn't burn her hand, but she felt my coffee was hot and knew not to put her finger in my coffee.
Learned the lesson.
Yes. So she didn't hurt herself, but she learned the lesson by feeling hot. This could be painful, and then never tried it again.
Yeah. So on the question of using the tone of your voice and being firm, I prefer not, as much as possible, not to have an angry tone, not to be, that firm, scary tone, because I think the reason it gets the kids' attention, which if you have to use it in an emergency, that's one thing, but using it every day, like I think some people do, so it's an intimidating tone. The idea is I'm using this big, loud, scary voice in the way that a lion uses a big, loud, scary roar, right? It's sending the signal. If I need to, I'm going to do what it takes to make you do what I need to make you do. And so I'd rather approach it from letting the heat of the moment pass, making sure they're safe. I'm not going to let them hurt themselves.
Right.
I'll pick them up and protect them if I need to. But if 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 at all possible, I'm going to wait until everyone is cooled down, maybe later that evening, maybe the next day, and I'm gonna say, hey, I've noticed that you've had a problem doing this one thing. Can we talk about that? Can you tell me what's going on?
Yeah.
And so instead of just saying, hey, do this right now, it's, hey, let's figure out why you're doing that, and let's get to the bottom of that, and let's find a solution. Like, what can we do to make it so that it's easier for you to do the thing you need to do?
So I'll say, sorry.
Flush ya.
I'll say, using the higher tones of voice and more angry tones of voice. I try not to use them, just like how you were saying, but I would say my reasoning's a little on the different side. So my daughter is quite resilient when it comes to things, and the more something happens, the more used to it or build tolerance she builds to it. I'm no proponent to, or I'm no proponent to somebody that hasn't yelled or been mean or mad or angry or had a lot of stuff like that. So I have severe PTSD from my military years and all this other stuff from all these things happening. So in the earlier years of my daughter's life, the simple things would make my aggression skyrocket. You know what I mean? And I would scream and anger and everything. I never really let the hitting happen, so that never happened. But raising my tone of voice and yelling and more, and every time she do something wrong, stop it, instead of, hey, what are you doing? Stop, And I've learned and not to do it, not because I shouldn't do it, it's wrong or whatever, but because the more I do it, the more she just kind of looks at me like, kind of gets up, it's the same old, so why, nothing new. So why do I need to listen today? So I've kind of learned that, with some other things, some anger medication.
Well, whatever it takes.
Yeah. But some calm down stuff. So if I treat the situations like that in a calmer manner, I do a lot of stuff where you were saying, where you kind of let the heat of the moment pass and kind of then deal with it. That does help a lot. I will say that works quite a bit. And letting things calm down before, and then I go talk to her and figure out, what the issue was, or whatever, we'll figure it out. And if it's just simple misbehavior, then we'll deal with it from there, but yeah, that definitely helps. There are times when I definitely am like, I'll scream at her, but it's 1,000 times rarer, I will say.
Yeah, and like you were saying with the her just saying this is the same old with any punishment or any raised voice or any kind of do this or else, that or else she'll get used to it, and so you'll have to keep upping the ante. And that's just a fundamental problem with that kind of approach, is that it'll keep just upping and upping and upping until you're just not willing to up it anymore. And then what do you do?
Well, to an extent, that's why you don't use spanking as the immediate disciplinary action. Spanking should, and I've read a bunch of stuff on this because me and my wife read a bunch throughout the years. It was, there's a bunch of studies about what's called backup spanking. It's almost like, it's like if you've told them 1,000 times, you've figured out all the scenarios, you've done everything, and then you get to a point where, all right, it's time for timeouts. You put the kid in timeout. Kid doesn't want to sit in timeout. You have to sit in timeout. So kid picking up, running away, sit, timeout, gets up, run away, sit, timeout. It's 3, 4, 5 times. It even said, they did a study over the course of like 20 years, and all the kids by the time they were 10 years old, if they got to that point where the parent took them and said, all right, time out, all those kids by the time they were 10, 12, 11, they were like 1,000 times better. Their mental focus was better. Their aggression levels were down. They were normal. They behaved. All the kids that weren't, they get into scenarios they don't know how to handle. They don't know when I should stop. They don't know that this isn't okay. Oh, that person's telling me to stop. Maybe they'll just calmly tell me to stop 17,000 times. So that was just what I read. So there was a study that I was reading. I even pulled it up earlier. It pulled a bunch of stuff. It was the American College of Pediatricians. The studies are in that document there, and it was what I was reading earlier before, and that's what they talk about, backup spanking. So it's like, and that's kind of what I've done over the years. So like I said, spanking for me has only been like 2 or 3 times max in all 5 years of her life. And I don't know, something I always notice too. I want to know your opinion on this specifically. So something I've noticed about a lot of the gentle parents and gentle parenting advocates, and like I said, I'm hoping you're a little different, because I feel as though your mindset's a little different. You're more reasonable with some stuff. But every gentle parent that I come across or advocate, they automatically assume. I've even watched videos and read about it and stuff. And every time, the first thing that they do is, when parents spank, and there's a big picture of a kid with like black and blue bruises all over them, teeth are bleeding, their back's bruised from tip to tip, like I'm over there just beating the ever-loving piss out of my child. And that's like, I don't know, that's like the furthest thing from ever going to be happening. You know what I mean? A spanking to me, like, I'm going to spank my wife's ass a little bit harder than that. You know what I mean? Like, come on here, Like, what do you think? Is that how you feel about every parent that spanks? Do I go over there and just like backhand the ever-loving piss out of my child? Or, for me, it's like a stop. That's it. That's as far as it ever has gone. How do you feel about that?
Sure. If that's not what you're doing, that's not what you're doing. And I think there's a lot of parents who take the very calculated, I will never spank in anger, I will always calm down first, take 10 minutes. I do think it can be a little odd for a child to learn that like love and aggression kind of go hand in hand, where this person who says they love me is smacking me. And so what do they learn about love, and about people that love them and what's okay for them to do? And then in regards to, I think you called it backup parenting, or some people will say, I'll only use spanking. Yeah, this is spanking, sorry. And some people will say, I'll only spank as a last resort. And so my issue with that is, I'm going to use an extreme example. I'm acknowledging that it's extreme and it's completely different. But so say a guy is asking a girl out on a date, and he completely wants her to come voluntarily. But as a last resort, if he has to, he's going to kidnap her, right? So that's gonna completely change the entire interaction from start to end, right? The girl's gonna sense, okay, something is not right, something really creepy is going on, something is off here. And so if you have aggression as a last resort, it changes the first part. And so in the same way, if you're trying to work with your kid, but you have that in your back pocket, you're just the interaction changes. And so if you don't have that as an option, you're going to try harder to figure things out. You're going to figure out what's going on. You're going to get to the root cause, because there is no other option. So that's just what is going to happen.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I understand that theory. I get it, but I mean, I don't, kids when they're 6 and under are different than grown-ups. They really are. They don't understand reason as well. They understand right from wrong. They understand, you teaching them things and whys and hows and stuff like that, to an extent, and they get more as they get older, but they still don't understand reasoning. You know, I mean, they don't understand they can't comprehend certain things. You know what I'm saying? So sometimes, in a way, you know, something like that, a backup spank, as long if that's what it takes to get them to understand, that's, I told you 1,000 times, you know, or, you know, don't do that, or whatever the case is. You know, that's, I mean, it's what it takes. And the correlation between whether you love them or not, I mean, I will say for 1,000 years, you know, love and physical pain has been a connection for all of human history. I mean, it's written into our DNA, you know, and then, you know, also, how many of us really remember the connection of getting spanked when we were 6? Like, 6 and before, I have no idea what happened. I can't remember that at all. So
Right, and just because you can't remember it doesn't mean it didn't have an effect, right? I mean, if it had no effect, why would you spank it anyways, right?
Well, I'll
it's
jump in on that.
Immediate knowledge. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's that, like I mentioned prior, the spanking isn't meant to create a abusive or a painful reaction. And
Right.
literally most parents, at least the ones I've known growing up, the ones that I've dealt with, spanking is not used in anger. It's not used as I'm going to make him feel my wrath, but hey, this is a consequence to your action. You're getting a spank. It's either you feel it enough that your butt moves, or it's a psychological click. Now, the reasoning for doing it is because, for me, I've seen people that I've grown up that's been through the gentle parenting and the passive parenting and all this. And so far, I can use a family that I know very well. Out of the 4 kids, one has a kid with like 4 different fathers. Another one's been in jail more times I can count. The other one, he's somewhat normal, but he's just kind of went left and right and all this stuff because he couldn't figure his way out. And then the oldest one actually got everything together because he got lucky and got himself in the right mindset and did all this stuff. So a 1 out of 4, or 1 out of 4 of the kids turned out okay. And then that's just one family. I can name probably 30 other families I grew up with where the parents were all about trying to be friends, all about trying to make sure that their kids' emotions were covered. Where my mom, like when I got in trouble, my mom had no trouble punishing me. And, you know, my mom outside of my marriage is my closest friend. The fact is I know a lot of people also who have been spanked, and we joke about it, who also talk about how their parents are their closest friends. The people I know that went through general parenting, I have never heard them say anything good about their parents. Now, me, I rather my kid, and this is my viewpoint, I want my kid to respect me enough that they're going to be somebody I want to be around when they become adults. I want them to understand right and wrong. I want them to be prepared for the real world and understand that people don't care about their feelings. That I love them. I'll do whatever I can to protect them. But there's going to be pains. There's going to be hard times. There's going to be things that happen. And I'll do what I can to help them be able to get through it. But the traditional parenting method, spanking, all this stuff, it comes down to the fact of you have to set a example or something for the parents to be able to collect to teach the kids. Because until they're at that age of comprehending, no, don't do that. This is going to end up causing you pain. Like, okay, my 2-year-old daughter, I can tell her no. She kind of understands, but until I give her a spank, then again, light spank, she will keep doing it. And it's one of those things. my son was the same way. Now I can say, no, stop doing what you're doing. You're going to get hurt. He looks at me and goes, well, how will I get hurt? Well, if you do this, this is going to happen and you're going to get hurt. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Good enough. I can
The
also
end
say,
goal is not spanking.
right. And like I said earlier, like using the brushing the teeth example, he knows well enough if he has a job to do, brush his teeth, and he gets something for it, as in at bedtime, I'll read him a story. You have to set, in the real world, you don't just get something because you want it. It's not like you go to the bank and say, hey, I want to buy a new house. Can you just give me $250,000, or can you just give me Bill Gates' bank account so I can buy whatever I want? They're going to look at you and tell you to get out of the bank. The fact is the fact of why we do, at least in traditional parenting style, the way we do things and the way I do things is to teach my kids consequences, teach them respect. It's not to teach them that they have to obey me, because if they don't, they're going to get hurt. The spanking portion comes in before they can comprehend, and you have that physical clicking that says, stop, this is bad. Now, this actually leads me to a question I had for you, that a lot of what I've heard teachers talk about, I've heard other people online talk about, that ever since the rise of gentle parenting and passive parenting and all this has gone, like when I was a kid, it was a thing, but not nowhere where it is now. Now it's just everywhere. And it's also, with all these gentle parenting things, teachers cannot teach kids because I don't feel like it. I don't like that because my soul hurts, or whatever little emotional thing they're having. I know I'm making a joke of it, but you get what I'm saying, right?
My heart hurts.
Exactly. And then what also ends up happening is, because they've never been taught discipline or taught there's really serious consequences for your actions, they then explode on, I mean, I'm sure you've seen the videos of kids trying to attack teachers, kids throwing fits and throwing desks. I mean, the world that our kids are in now are just a disaster, and something needs to go back to making the kids be able to understand right and wrong. And from what I'm seeing, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but with the rise of gentle parenting increasing and becoming more, it's all about your feelings, the more kids seem to be getting out of control, being more violent because they don't think that they have any consequences. I had to deal with kids the other day, or no, sorry, my neighbor dealt with kids the other day because they didn't think they had any consequences trying to yell and scream and try to harass somebody. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So as far as the you said quite a few things, but
Yeah, I know.
a lot of people, maybe they call themselves gentle parents, maybe they don't. I think a lot of people are going to permissive parenting, to free range parenting, which, just to be clear, is not at all what I would advocate for. I say between kind of authoritarian parenting and free range or permissive parenting, peaceful parenting is right in the middle. So authoritarian is win lose. You do what I say, I win, you lose. My way or the highway kind of thing. And permissive free range parenting is, oh, whatever you want. I'll make it. It's okay, whatever. Okay, I wanted you to do this, but whatever, you wanted it. And then peaceful parenting is, I care about what you think. I care about your perspective. I'm going to do everything I can to make you happy, but also I have these expectations. You need to be brushing your teeth. You need to be safe. Like I'm not going to bend on certain things, and I'm going to negotiate. I'm going to compromise so that we both get what we want. It doesn't have to be I win and you lose, and it doesn't matter where you're coming from. You have to do what I say. So I think a lot of people aren't having that perspective. I don't think it's a majority of people that are working together with their kid to find solutions both people are happy with. I think it's a lot of win-lose going on, whether it's the kid winning or the parent winning. I think there's also a lot of losing going on. And so, yeah, no, I don't think the world is adopting this peaceful parenting. What I advocate for, I think it's very uncommon, and we have a long ways to go on both ends of the spectrum, permissive and authoritarian. I think we can all towards the middle a little bit.
And I don't disagree with that. That there's still like, I believe I parent like, I believe I do better than like my biological father, who he I would say is more of the free range. And like, honestly, I've used him as an example before, where all the way up until I was a teenager, he kept telling me, "Oh, well, you're going to hurt my feelings. You're going to make me upset. You're going to do this." It was all about his emotions and what so have you. And by the time I hit a teenager, I'm like, I don't care about you. I couldn't tell you where he lives now, what he's doing. I mean, I have no idea anything about my biological father, because for him, it was all about his emotions and how I was hurting his emotions and things like that. Help me understand this, because you did say at the beginning that you're not against disciplining, you're against punishment. What are some forms of discipline that you find useful? Because when I think of discipline, it's me saying, stop or you will not be able to do this. Stop or we're going to go inside. Stop or there's a consequence that they're either going to lose something or something like that. Because like Mr. Pancake said, spanking, I try to use as a last option. And with my son, I don't even use it as an option anymore. My daughter, I try to get her calm. I try to do all this. But again, she's going through the terrible twos. And sometimes you just want to pull your hair out and say, why? So what disciplines do you find to be acceptable, or what do you consider discipline?
Yeah. So first, to go back to what you're saying about your father, who was saying how disappointed and how upset it was making him, and I find that very emotionally manipulative. But to be clear, I completely disavow that, and I think that's not only ineffective but wrong to manipulate in that way. I prefer to talk with the child and say, "Hey, I've noticed you're doing this thing. What's going on with what's going on. I prefer not to say why. Why are you doing that? I find that it's easier to say that in an aggressive way. So I like to say things like, what's going on. But so I'd want to get to the bottom of it rather than just kind of, don't do that because it makes me feel bad. So just to be clear.
Okay.
And to your question about discipline. So the word discipline has the same root word as the word disciple, right? And so it means to instruct, to teach. And so that doesn't necessarily mean to punish. And so in my view, I'd be correcting, instructing. And so there's no one size fits all solution there. It's not, I'm going to use a threat. I'm going to use a timeout. I'm going to use a spanking. Like that's not how I operate. It's more, I'm going to teach my child, and whatever it takes to teach them, I'm going to figure out how to teach it to them. And so a lot of the time that means figuring out where they're coming from, getting to the root of the issue, telling them, hey, if you keep doing this, this is how things are going to go. This is the natural consequences of where that's going. So how can we figure out how to solve the issue that you're running into, your perspective, the problems you're having, but also make sure we don't get to these natural consequences that neither of us want, right? And so let's get there together. And so that's a big tool on my tool belt, is that kind of problem solving.
All right. So I have one last thing before I let Mr. Pancake jump back in, because he looks like he has a couple things to want to say before we wrap this up. But there's basically, let me see here, what did I put? The fact of you guys, or what did I put it? Parenting dude because of parents. So one thing that, like I've mentioned before at the beginning as well, but I've read it many places, is where it talks about gentle parenting, or whatever people are saying their gentle parenting is done because either they got spanked when they were young, and say their parents spanked them for too long, spanked them till they were 16 years old and they were able to finally get out of the house. You know what I mean? Or they just they have anger issues, because I've told you, I've tried to get people on before, and as soon as I said, hey, we are not going to yell and scream and interviews end the moment we get yelling at each other and name calling, that ends it, they don't want to talk to me. Because I have a serious theory that a lot of, like my biological father, huge anger issues. He did everything he could to use words and his feelings, like you said, emotional manipulation. And in all truth, a lot of my perspective of the general pairings that I see is people using emotional discipline. So I go, and that's just the things I've seen. You seem to have a different take on it, which I don't agree with your theory on spanking. I'll be honest with you there, but I do agree with other things that you're saying. So I believe I'm at least I'm coming to an understanding of your viewpoint, and to me that's good. But I also feel like a lot of people, or that it seems from my perspective of what I'm seeing out there and the things I've seen, is people talk about the reason they don't want to spank is because of they got spanked and they felt that they have trauma. And mind you, my mom whooped me in front of a police station before, and again, she's my best friend. So it's that kind of concept that we have different. Now, mind you, I royally screwed up and I deserved what I got. But the fact is it seems like people are sitting there going, like I'm saying, oh, well, my dad spanked me when I was 10 years old because I yelled at him and threw my cake in his face. You know what I mean? Well, yeah, you do something like that, there's going to be a reaction. Now, mind you, if the father went off and just beated him to a pulp, that's uncalled for. But again, those are the two items I'm finding that it seems like people have against spanking, is because they have either, I mean, I'm not denying they don't have trauma, but I don't think the massive people that have the anti-spanking viewpoint has had that trauma that's being said. You know what I mean? They might have gotten spanked, or they got told they were spanked and felt like they had the trauma. So what's your view there?
Yeah, I can't speak to whether people have anger issues or not, or specifically gentle parents. I know a lot of people in general have issues controlling their emotions.
Right.
I think one reason, maybe where this is coming from, is that something about punishment in general, not just spanking, is it's kind of inherently frustrating, because if the parent is assuming that the problem is motivation, and if it's not motivation and there is some other problem going on, whether it's just what the kid thinks is the problem or not, when that child is being punished, they're thinking, this is unjust, I'm frustrated, I hate my parents, this sucks. And like having all these big emotions, they're not sitting there thinking, next time I think I'm going to consider what the consequences of this will be, and I'm going to use this timeout as an opportunity to think about what I've done. Like, it's not this calm consideration. Kids are just stewing in their anger, maybe exploding in their anger. And so I think it can be very frustrating if your side of the story isn't listened to. And if there was a legitimate reason for doing that thing that looks really bad, or you're just trying to figure out how to have self-control, and maybe you were just super tired, and you're just in the wrong frame of mind. Like, there's a lot of reasonable explanations for why kids are misbehaving, and if you're not helping them through that and you're just assuming that they're being bad, well, that can be a very frustrating experience.
Right. And I don't argue that. So, I mean, but that still doesn't answer the question of the fact of, and I'm assuming you've done research on the gentle parenting movement and the peaceful parenting, since that's what you're advocating for. So in your research and your readings and all this, and the things that you read that people are saying to you in your accounts and such, do you find that a lot of it has to do with maybe not anger issue, but even I was spanked as a child, so I refuse to spank my kid. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm not aware of any studies of people saying that they were angry about being spanked. Um, in the research that I've done, I've heard a lot of studies about the long-term effects of things like corporal punishment and timeouts and things, and there's a lot of studies in that area and adverse childhood experiences. There's a whole section of literature about the ACEs and the long-term effects of various kinds of abuse. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people think their parents were bad parents and they want to do a lot better than their parents and they're upset with their parents. I mean, and there's a lot of people who say, well, I tried talking with my parents about how they raised me because I have some major issues and they just wouldn't hear me. And so there's actually a movement of people, it's called defooing. So FOO is family of origin. So they're cutting their family off. I mean, I guess you don't have contact with your biological father either, so I guess you're not alien from this idea. But the way they acted was unacceptable. They wouldn't even come to the table and talk about it. So yeah, I have issues. People have issues with their parents, and not me specifically, but they. So yes, I think there's a lot of frustration and hurt that has happened from parents, and people remember that, and it sticks with them.
I understand. What was your deciding factor that made you decide that you wanted a gentle parent then?
Yeah. So so for me, it was a couple things. Um, I mean, and I talked about the three kind of ways you can approach it, and I was kind of convinced like one at a time, and it started with the moral argument with the non-aggression principle. I was convinced that it's wrong to use aggression unless it's self-defense. I think that's just such a simple and clear argument that it's not okay to ever strike anyone for any reason or use any kind of violence in any form unless it's in self-defense. And so if you extrapolate that principle, then it can't be okay to use spanking. And then the next the next kind of level was the kind of data argument, and and child raising and spanking has been extensively studied. And so, for example, one piece of data that was quite compelling is that so smoking, we all society unanimously basically agrees that smoking is very harmful. And so on average, people that smoke, they live an average of 10 years shorter lives. Their life expectancy is 10 years shorter. And so for people that have so this adverse childhood experience, so there's seven of them, and they're neglect, verbal abuse, physical punishment of any kind. There's a whole list of them. And so if you have four or more of those seven, in which spanking is in one of those categories, then your average life expectancy is shortened by 20 years. And there's actually 40% more children who are spanked than people who smoke in the United States. And so spanking or adverse childhood experiences are a more prevalent issue, 40% more prevalent, and they have twice as negative of an impact, according to this study. And so that was quite compelling for me. And the third reason was kind of the biblical aspect. And so there's this whole question of, well, doesn't the Bible say that if you withhold the rod from your son, you hate him, and all these verses in Proverbs? And so I after doing some studying on my own, it turns out they're actually not talking about hitting toddlers at all. They're actually, or spanking toddlers or using a rod on toddlers, is actually talking about the word translated as child is the Hebrew word na'ar, and that word actually means a boy who's after puberty and but yet to be married, so kind of 12 to 18 range, a teenage boy. And so they're talking about, and you can read in Deuteronomy 25 where it says, if a man is found guilty in court, what you should do is you should beat him with a rod, and that's in court by a judge, and it's not like your dad in your house, right? So it's like due process in a legal setting. And so if you read those proverbs and you understand it's actually not like child is just a mistranslation, I mean, technically in our culture, a 12-year-old is a child, but in their culture, a 12-year-old was a man. So it's really missing the point of the passage. So it's saying if you don't let criminals be punished, terrible things are going to happen. We need to punish children. We need to punish criminals. And it's saying if you withhold punishment from criminals, like beating them, like you don't let the judge beat them, this is not going to end well for them. Like it leads to death. Like they're going to go down a very dark path in life. And so those are the three ways: the moral argument, the data argument, and then also the biblical argument as well.
See, now here's the biblical side of it. I can dispute very well. I have spoken with several pastors and even rabbis and things like this in a prior project I worked on. And that was a topic that came up. That there I can go into great detail with, but that I'm not going to do right now, just because we've already been talking for a little over an hour at this point. The reason that I actually was kind of asking the question is because I also, when I heard you on call with, or Dads with Mics, who we're going to have him on to talk with as well, great guy, but you did mention on there that the big driving factor to you not wanting to spank was because of your childhood. And today and yesterday I went through your profile. I was looking at things, seeing what comments were, and it seemed like a good amount of in there was people talking about you helped them with their trauma. You helped them deal with the fact that they were spanked as kids. I mean, it's just in your profile alone and from your conversation before that I was spanked as a child seemed to be a factor of, if I just went off of what you said and what I read on your profile alone, the being spanked as a kid is the driving factor for gentle parenting.
Yeah, so I don't know about driving factor. Like, yes, I'm frustrated with the way my parents spanked me. I think it was not right, and I think it was excessive. And but it was far from the only reason that I'm going down the peaceful parenting path.
And I understand that. I wanted to be fully clear of why I was asking the question, because don't take it the wrong way, but it felt like you were trying to avoid that with my question. And that is, I told you at the beginning, I'm going to be fully honest and point out things back and forth so we can make sure everyone has all of our facts, has all your facts. And I'll admit, I'm not right. Not everybody should parent the way I do. Parenting, there's many ways of parenting. And I've said that. Mr. Pancake has said that. There's no one fit all way of everything. So I, again, want to make sure that we're on the same page with everything.
Yeah. I mean, if your dad died or someone you love died from lung cancer because they smoked their whole life, you're a whole lot more likely to advocate against smoking than
Right.
if, he smoked, every other week or something, and, as someone who was, mistreated as a child, it's a particularly, the issue is really close to my heart. And so, yeah, that's part of where I'm coming from.
And I fully understand that. I mean, our childhood does make up our destination as an adult. There is no question of, that's why we try to make sure we raise our children properly so that they can be where they're in a good place when they become adults. So, I mean, really that gets to a lot of my questions and things that I wanted to try to figure out. I learned a lot from your viewpoints. Like I said, there's quite a bit of stuff that you said that I agree with. I am not completely against all the methods of gentle parenting. I'm not going to stop giving my daughter a little spank on the butt to tell her to stop trying to grab something or grab the cat's tail. But at the same note, if she doesn't stop when I say stop, I have to do something so she doesn't hurt the cat. You know what I mean? I do still have my way. You're going to obviously have your way, and I'm not going to expect you to change your way, but we both can at least come to some understanding, some agreement on different ways of handling stuff. Mr. Pancake, you have anything you want to add or find out before we wrap this up?
I had a few things. They may take a little longer, than we should have on this time. But As far as like the moral factor, I don't know. I just feel morally it's almost like, I don't know, in a weird way, like a political spectrum with some things. Like there's a lot of things like on certain, like I'll use the left and the right in American politics. You know what I mean? A lot of things left wingers think, um, when you want to pay off tuition assistance or whatever, pay off all these college things for all these people, that got all these things. Morally, that seems correct, right? Because all these people are so in debt for going to college or whatever, and this and that and the other. But then you look at the other side of it. The right say, well, you understand where the government gets its money from, right? It doesn't just have money. All the money comes from them. So by doing so, you're hurting. Say there's 100 people that are going to get their things paid off. By paying off their stuff, you're taking money from 500 people. So in sense, by doing a good thing for these 100 people, you're hurting these 500. And that is, I mean, this one thing I was reading, this I was sitting here, I was actually pulling it up, is that same thing I was talking about, where it was a bunch of countries over the years, New Zealand, Germany, Austria, they all like banned, France, another one, like New Zealand completely banned any sort of physical correction whatsoever, where they're not allowed to spank at all. Like parents are zero, not allowed. But it's talking about other countries are considering such bans, and activists are preparing to lobby in the U.S. There's no what it says is there's no objective evidence that any of these bans have curbed child abuse or teen violence as intended. And it says, in fact, there's more evidence that the incidence of each has increased following these bans, especially in countries that enforce them more vigorously. So to me, and this is that study I was talking about earlier, the American College of Pediatrics says research on disciplinary spanking is misleading. I mean, it talks about a lot of the research that they were talking about. Well, I can't remember the names of it. There's too many fallacies, correlation fallacy and extrapolation fallacy, whatever that means, and then the lumping fallacy, where they say, spanking and this are connected or they're correlated, when they don't, in the study, they don't tell you, well, was the bad behavior prior to the spank or after the spank or during the spank? It doesn't say that stuff. So that was the basis of the study or whatever. And it was talking about some other study with some two German names, whatever it was. But in the end of it, it talks about the banning. And it says that banning of it sort of, I mean, it's almost, according to the study, I'm not saying it's true, I don't know, because it's a study. It says it almost causes more issues, more problems, and violence, physical abuse, child abuse, all those things are higher in all the countries that have banned. I mean, it's almost like the gun-free zones, or countries with no guns, or where they ban guns. I mean, people just get a knife and stab, or there's actually more, all the people that don't have guns are good people, all the people that do have guns are bad. So gun violence is actually up in the case. So I don't know, that's just what it says. So to me, I don't know, morally it doesn't, on one end it makes sense, but on the other end it's like, well, by not doing so, you're causing more. So
yeah, I mean, there's back in the 1800s, there's the argument, the pragmatists, they were saying, if we free the slaves, we're going to freeze to death. No one's going to pick the cotton. What are we going to do? We're not going to have any food. No one's working in the field. And they were saying, what will we do without slavery? We need slavery. But at the end of the day, the answer is, we'll figure it out. Like, if it's wrong, we need to stop, and we need to figure out what the right answer is. And as far as the correlational studies, since like I think the 70s,
Gershoff and Grogan Kaler is the study. That's what's called. Right.
So since the 70s, they don't allow, they won't ethics boards won't allow studies that are experimental, where we're assigning families and children to spanking groups and non-spanking groups, because there's so much evidence that spanking does harm that they're not okay ethically assigning children, in these randomized controlled experiments. And so we have to make a decision from correlational data. Unfortunately, that's just how it is. And society has made large sweeping decisions based on correlational data before. So for example, we never assigned anyone in experiments to smoking and non-smoking groups. The data was so clear correlationally that it was clear smoking is causing cancer, smoking cigarettes is causing cancer. And so we can draw a similar conclusion with spanking.
Yeah, it uses cancer in this.
Hold on, Mr. Pancakes, let me jump in on this real quick, because
sure.
First off, relating banning spanking to slavery is complete crap. Saying that
that's a little
saying
much.
that the government needs to ban spanking just like they banned slavery is basically saying the government needs to tell you how to parent. Now, we've been very much adamant on this. Anytime the government tries to get into our business or my business is a big no-no to me, because the government should have very little to do with how I raise my kids. The fact of, if the government had their way, they would tell me what I can teach my kid. They would tell me how to teach them. They would tell me what religion I could teach them. They would tell me that I couldn't teach them a religion. They could tell me whatever they want, no matter what my values are. Slavery, there was no question that it was wrong. People back then, there was abolitionists, and there was people even in the South that was against slavery. Using slavery as a form of imprisoning somebody and correlating that to spanking, I'm going to say is complete crap to use. So now you might disagree with me, but that's the fact. Then
I think going on to extreme on one end.
Exactly. And then there has been studies on smokers and non-smokers, because I've actually read them when I was a smoker. The fact is they didn't ban studies on smokers and non-smokers like they did spanking. Yes, spanking, they did say you cannot run a study on a family that spanks and not spanking this and that, because they felt like there was a negative reaction without the study. So they made a decision not to run those studies because they didn't either, and I don't know their exact reasonings, they might actually have had the emotional, well, spanking's bad, we don't want to run the studies because we don't want to risk the negative impact. Or they might have said, we don't want to find out what the actual studies say. There's many ways of looking at it, but the fact is, like I said, relating spanking and telling us that the parents should have no control of how they raise their children. There are laws that say you cannot abuse your children. Yeah. Here in America, there's laws that say you are not allowed to abuse your children. Now, I agree with that. Abusing your children, leaving bruises all the time, basically doing things that hurts the child is bad. There's no one in a right mind that's going to say it's not. And yes, the government should step in to protect a child that could be in harm. But to say that because I give my daughter a light smack on the butt, I should go to jail and relate that to slavery is crap. That's an emotional manipulation of trying to pull somebody's heartstring of, oh, well, slavery is bad, so we need to relate it to this. That is the same kind of crap that my biological father tried to pull with his emotional stuff, just using different wording. And that's exactly the same thing I see a lot of gentle parenting do, is if they cannot find a rational thing to say, they pull emotional manipulation out. And yes, I am pissed because we just talked about emotional manipulation. You literally talked about how bad and how much you were against it, and then you pulled that card out and did it too. No, that's...
Yeah, so I don't think that's fair to call it emotional manipulation. I'm making a point. I'm saying in the same way, morality needs to come first. Yes, I used an extreme example to prove a point. I think in the extremes, the principles become very clear. So in this extreme example, it's very clear. And so in this way, it's also clear that morality needs to come first, and the pragmatic solution will figure it out along the way. I think that's a fair point.
Right. But in a morality version of that same scenario, where you were talking about how if the only reason any sort of force or physical force or violence or hitting or whatever should be used is in a form of self-defense, right? Well, where does that come into play when, like, if you want to use extreme higher examples, where does that come into play when I'm across the street and that guy's robbing that store? Should I go over there and go stop it, or should I go, well, I don't got to self-defense myself and just forget about it? So in that same scenario, should I have a gun because I'm a concealed carry holder. Should I cross the street and maybe go protect the teenager working the gas station from that 40-year-old man with a gun that's quite large because he did a lot of time in prison and tattooed and angry and mean, or whatever the case is, so he's physically threatening this young girl with a gun and maybe even tries to shoot somebody or hurt somebody, so I mean, how does that connect? So does
Yeah.
doing that
that's
just
an
to me doesn't
extension
make
of
any sense.
self-defense. Yeah, I'd say that's okay. It's that is self-defense. You're defending someone else, and as soon as that threat is done, as soon as they're not threatening someone else's life, if they're holding them at gunpoint, then you stop using force at that point, right? And so I would say that's an extension of self-defense. So it's protected in the non-aggression principle. In the same way, if
And that's
if
how
a
I look at spanking. I look at spanking as
but
the same, in the same extension, because I'm teaching my child now not to be this when they're older, so they don't hurt people, so they don't do
right,
these
so
bad things. So
that's a not a very strong argument because a decade from now, are they going to hurt someone? That's much different than a prison convict pointing out
yeah,
pointing a gun at someone. That's like 100% obvious. This person is threatening someone's life, so I'm going to
yeah,
use self-defense. That's different than 10 years from now. I think maybe he might hit someone. Like it's not self-defense at that point.
right.
Well,
Well,
let's do this. I'm
yeah,
sorry to interrupt, but I actually
yeah.
have to get on to another meeting. So
About that
I,
time, anyways.
it really is. We've been talking for about an hour and 15 minutes or so like that. So, Luke, obviously we have disagreements, we have agreements and all this. And that came out very obvious in this episode. Where do you want people that want to learn more about your philosophy? Where do you want them to reach out to you?
Yeah. You can find me on Twitter, or X as it's now called, at peaceful_tips. And I tweet about parenting all the time, so you can find me there.
Perfect. Mr. Pancake, what about you?
All right, yeah, as usual, the normal, the pancakeswithyourdad.com. I'm on X or Twitter, True Social, and Facebook quite a bit, as well as LinkedIn quite often. You can find me at all those places, but the main hub is definitely the pancakeswithyourdad.com. You'll find everything, all socials, all resources, articles, anything you can ever find is all right there.
Sounds perfect. And of course, Call with Dads is callwithdads.com. We can be found on YouTube at almost any audio distributor, any place you want to listen to your audio podcast. And we're on social medias like X, Facebook, LinkedIn. I'd say I'm horrible about